It's been a working week here in Detroit, my hometown, the Motor City, where the factories hum and the neighborhoods keep their own rhythm. Last week I told you about the smoke. 650 on the Air Quality Index, the worst reading since they started keeping records in 1999, and a downtown skyline you couldn't find from Belle Isle. This week it lifted, moderate by Monday. Everybody went back outside and stopped talking about it, which is what we do. Hold on to Ontario for a minute, though, because Ontario wasn't finished with us. On Friday in Windsor, close enough to see from the foot of West Jefferson, close enough that the smoke made the trip in about a day, Canada cut a ribbon on a bridge to us, the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a mile and a half of cable-stayed span across the Detroit River. 6 lanes, 2 towers rising 722 feet, 216 cables, $4.5 billion paid for almost entirely by Canada, connecting I-75 on our side to Highway 401 on theirs. It is the first new vehicle crossing between Detroit and Windsor since the Ambassador Bridge opened in 1929. 97 years, and it's named for a farm kid from Saskatchewan who played 25 seasons for the Red Wings and belongs somehow to both cities at once. That ceremony was supposed to be a joint one, Canadians and Americans, 1 ribbon, 2 flags. On Tuesday, Canada canceled it. New tariffs had been announced, along with a statement that the old bridge deal no longer stood, and the United States would now be taking half the profit. Ottawa decided this was not the week for a cross-border celebration. So Friday's event was Canadians only. The press badges handed out that morning read, Inauguration 2026. Somebody had taken the word celebration off. There were no oversized novelty scissors. Everybody got their own small pair, the kind you'd find in a kitchen drawer. There were fruit cups, there were pastries, there were kids playing hockey off to one side, which is about as Gordie Howe as it gets. Windsor's mayor, Drew Dilkins, gave a speech about wanting more trade and more jobs and more opportunity, and never once said the president's name, and everybody in that tent understood him perfectly. No American officials came. The whole thing took about an hour. $274 million in trade crosses that corridor every single day. It is the busiest land border crossing on the continent. And on Friday, the 2 countries on either end of it could not stand next to each other for 45 minutes. Here's the part that didn't make the wire copy. On our side, that bridge lands in Delray. Delray is down past Zug Island, wedged between the river and I-75. It was Hungarian, then Polish, then black and Latino, and white and poor. And it has been losing ground to industry since about 1960. The bridge got built there for an unromantic reason. The land was cheap, and a lot of it was already publicly owned. The people who lived there did not want it. When it became clear it was coming anyway, they organized and negotiated $45 million in community benefits, home repairs, new windows, air filtration systems, a home swap program for anybody who wanted out. A couple hundred families took the swap and left. A couple hundred stayed. So think about what those families did this month. They spent 4 days in the middle of July breathing the worst air in the world, windows shut, filters running, watching smoke pour in from Ontario. And then on Friday, they watched Ontario throw a party for a bridge that will route a few thousand trucks a day directly over their houses. Nobody at that ceremony mentioned Delray. I've been listening to this bridge get argued about for 20 years, and I can't remember the last time anybody did. Something lighter and just as Detroit, Saturday afternoon in Dearborn, off Hubbard Road, right in the shadow of Ford World Headquarters, they closed a few streets around the Park Lane Towers and ran a 1,000-horsepower Formula One car around a course built out of concrete barriers. Red Bull Showrun, free, no ticket, just show up. They brought the F1 car and a Raptor T1 Plus, the Dakar truck with the Baja racer Chris Pulvordi driving, burnouts, drifts, tire smoke, and a noise that isn't like anything else on Earth. Dearborn has heard a great many engines. It had never heard that one on a public street. And here's the small thing I liked. That event was supposed to happen the Saturday before. They postponed it a week, not for rain, not for a permit, for the air. Ford and Red Bull looked at the smoke coming down out of Ontario and decided you can't ask 20,000 people to stand in a parking lot and breathe it. So the fastest cars on Earth sat in a truck for 7 days, waiting on the wind. Over in Hamtramck this week, a different kind of Detroit craftsmanship got itself a museum wall. The Northern Guard are the supporters group behind Detroit City FC, the ones at Keyworth who stand for 90 minutes and sing. Since 2012, they've been making tifo, the enormous hand-painted banners that get unfurled over an entire section right before kickoff. They're held up for about 90 seconds, then they're rolled up and put away. They make them by hand, hand-traced, hand-painted, designed by their own people in basements and backyards and on the floor of an old factory, the Russell Industrial Center mostly. Nobody gets paid. The finished pieces get given to the club or given to a person, and otherwise they live in a storage room. This summer, a curator came through, picked out work going back more than a decade, and now it's hanging in a museum exhibit alongside supporters' art from all over the country. Their own write-up notes that stuff painted on a factory floor is now displayed as art. Soot, smoke holes, and all. One of them put it about right. There aren't many chances for a bunch of people who yell at soccer games to show anybody what they actually made. And the Tigers. On Wednesday, they woke up 47-54, close enough to the wild card to hurt, not close enough to be sure of anything. A trade deadline coming on the 3rd of August, and Tariq Skubal, 2 Cy Youngs, a free agent this winter, sitting on the roster like an unopened envelope. Every baseball conversation I had this week was the same conversation. Do you trade the best pitcher in the American League for 6 good years you can't see yet, or keep him for 9 more weeks you probably can't win? Nobody knows. That's what makes it a Detroit conversation. We have been on both sides of that trade before, and we remember exactly how each one turned out. Now, closer to home, Lakeview, Michigan, an ordinary city in the midst of Metro Detroit, which is to say, exactly like every other city and town in Metro Detroit. It's the last week of July, which is when the trim gets painted, or doesn't. There is a thing that happens in a Lakeview marriage around the third week of July. The wife comes out onto the back step with her coffee, and she looks at the south side of the house for a while, and she doesn't say anything, and then she goes back inside. And that's it. That's the whole conversation. It has been conducted entirely in silence, and the man has lost it, because he knows. He has known since May. The trim on the south side is going. The paint has that dry, chalky look where you can rub it off with your thumb, and every single day he has driven into that driveway and looked directly at it and thought about something else on purpose. So Saturday morning, Charlie Smith got out the ladder. Charlie's a classmate of mine, and he had it all planned. Scrape, prime, 2 coats, done by Sunday. He put the ladder up against the house at 8:15 in the morning. At 11:40, he was still standing in the driveway, holding a paint scraper, telling me about a man named Dwayne Pelkey. Here's a thing I believe about men, and I say it as one of them, so nobody has to write in. Men are not handymen. That is a costume we put on. What men actually are, underneath, is migrants, wanderers. We are built to walk over a hill and see what's on the other side of it, and then tell everybody about it for the rest of our lives, at length, with embellishments. We are storytellers and philosophers and, God help us, poets. Put a man alone in a garage with a box of his father's tools, and within 20 minutes he is not organizing anything. He is somewhere in 1968. Give that same man a ladder and a can of primer and a whole free Saturday, and what you have created is not a painting project. What you have created is 8 uninterrupted hours of thinking, with a legitimate excuse attached to it. The paint is the alibi. But in Lakeview, you cannot say that out loud, and you certainly cannot hire anybody, because if a truck pulls up to your house with a company name on the side of it, and men get out and paint your trim, the whole street will be gracious about it. Nobody will say one word to your face, but there will be an adjustment. Somebody will mention at church in a caring voice that they saw a truck at your place, and somebody else will say, "Oh?" And that "oh" carries a considerable freight. It means, is it the back? Is it money? Is it the marriage? Is he sick, and they're not telling anybody? A man in Lakeview will spend 4 consecutive weekends and a great deal of ibuprofen doing badly what a professional would do well in a day and a half, and he will do it because the alternative is being wondered about. So Charlie's on the ladder, and about 1.5 feet of scraping in, he finds it. Under 3 coats of paint on the trim above the side door, cut into the wood with a pocket knife. CS 1969. He had forgotten he did it, 57 years, and he had genuinely, completely forgotten. He was 12. His father was painting that same trim the first time, and Charlie was supposed to be handing up the brushes. And there he is at 70, on a ladder, on the south side of the same house, holding the same job. He stood there so long his wife came out to see if he'd hurt himself, which is how we get to Dwayne Pelkey. Dwayne Pelkey lived on Larchmont, and he sold industrial fasteners, and in 1972 he told everybody at work that he was going to drive to Alaska, not move there, drive there. He had the maps, he had a route, he had a station wagon with a bad differential that he was going to fix first. He talked about that trip for 31 years. He fixed the differential, then the transmission went, then his mother got sick, then he retired, and by then his back was no good for sleeping in a car, and then he died in 2004, and the wagon sat in that garage the whole time under a tarp with the maps still folded in the glove box. And Charlie told me that story standing in his driveway with a scraper in his hand and a ladder leaning against a house he has lived in for 57 years and did not appear to notice a single thing about it. I didn't point it out. You don't. By the way, Charlie got about 11 feet of trim scraped on Saturday. He did another 4 feet Sunday. He told me he's ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, Uncle Bruce has been cleaning out the garage since the second week of June. He is currently at the stage where everything that was in the garage is now in the driveway, which is a stage that can last into September. And Aunt Barb has stopped asking, which is worse. Now, church. Father Roman Sikora has been at St. Anne's 11 years, and he is, and I mean this affectionately, a strange man. He keeps a telescope, a serious one, not a department store telescope, a real one, on a mount that lives under a fitted cover on the rectory patio, and he will show it to you at length, whether or not you have expressed interest. He has been known to work Jupiter into a homily. He once explained the Star of Bethlehem to the 8th grade for 40 minutes using a basketball and a grapefruit, and by all accounts, it was tremendous. And on the 12th of August, there is going to be a total eclipse of the sun. Not here. Here we get a partial, which is to say, a bite out of the corner. The kind of thing where if nobody told you, you would think it had clouded over. The real one goes over Greenland and Iceland and northern Spain. First total eclipse over mainland Europe since 1999. Father Roman is going to Iceland. He has been going to Iceland for 4 years now, in the sense that he's been talking about it. He has the flight. He has a place booked, the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, which he pronounces with a confidence I am not in a position to evaluate. Totality out there runs 2 minutes and 8 seconds. 4 years of planning, 2 minutes and 8 seconds. He announced it from the pulpit 2 Sundays ago, and about 6 people applauded, which for St. Anne's is a standing ovation. But here's the part he didn't announce. There are people going to Iceland who are not going for the corona. Father Roman's been getting the emails. A fellow from somewhere out of state found his name on the parish website and has now written him 4 times at considerable length about what this eclipse signifies. There's scripture in it. There's a chart. There's a good deal about the sun being darkened and the moon not giving her light, and a strong implication that a priest who is traveling 4,000 miles to look at it ought to know what he's looking at. I asked Father Roman what he wrote back. He said he wrote back that it was a shadow, that the moon has been throwing that shadow across this planet at regular, predictable, calculable intervals since long before there was anybody standing here to be frightened by it, and that we can tell you where it will land in the year 2400, and that the reason we can tell you is that it is not a message, it is just the moon. And then he said the thing that stayed with me. He said, the tragedy isn't that the man is frightened. He said, everybody's frightened. He said the tragedy is that the man is frightened and there's nobody in the room with him, just the screen, just the chart, and a screen will agree with you all night long. And that's the other thing I've been thinking about this week. Nobody hitchhikes anymore. I did when I was young. Everybody did. You stood on the shoulder of Gratiot with your thumb out, and eventually a car stopped and you got in. And for the next 40 minutes you were sealed in a Chevrolet with a complete stranger who was nothing like you. A man who voted differently. A woman who had buried a husband. A fellow who had been in Korea and wanted to talk about it, or didn't, and talked about the radiator instead. And you could not leave. That was the whole thing. You could not leave, and neither could he. And so you talked. And by the time you got out at the light, you knew something about a person you would never have chosen. We stopped doing that, for good reasons mostly. I'm not arguing we should start again, but something went with it, and I don't think we ever replaced it. Now a man could go an entire year, without spending 40 uninterrupted minutes beside somebody who disagrees with him. He can pick his news, pick his channel, pick his neighborhood, pick his church, pick the 6 people he texts, and every one of them will hand the same idea back to him, slightly polished. And a person alone in a house with a screen that agrees with him is not being comforted. Norb Sadowski lives on Fenmore, 3 houses in from the corner, 81 years old, never married, and for 32 years he read water meters for the city. Think about that job. He walked into basements, every basement in this town. He knew whose furnace was bad, whose kid had moved back in, who had a second freezer full of venison, and who had nothing in it at all. He was in and out of 400 houses a month, and he knew everybody, and everybody knew Norb. He retired in 2010. His sister died in 2019. That was the last one. And I'd say for the last 2 or 3 years, Norb has been getting his information somewhere, and I don't know where, and I don't think it's anywhere good. Because the things he'd tell you when you saw him at the Kroger store stopped being ordinary complaints and started being, I don't know the word, architectural? There was a system to them. There was a plan, and it involved the water, and it involved certain trucks, and it involved something he was fairly sure had been buried at the north end of Uptown Park. Nobody argued with him. That's the thing. Everybody was polite, and polite is what you do instead of arguing when you have decided somebody is not really in the conversation anymore. Tuesday night, about 9:45, Norb went out on his porch with a rifle and started firing it into his own hedge. Nobody was hurt. I want to say that first because when I tell people this, that's the question. Nobody was hurt. He was aiming at the hedge and at one point, apparently, at the air above the hedge, and he went through the better part of a box of shells, and the whole street called it in at once. Gary and Leroy got there in about 4 minutes. Now, Lakeview has 6 full-time officers, and Gary and Leroy are 2 of them, and I would not describe either of them as tactical. Gary is 58 and has a bad hip. Leroy coaches middle school wrestling. They did not clear the street. They did not get behind the car. Leroy walked up the driveway and stopped about halfway and said, "Norb, it's Leroy." And Norb said something about the trucks. And Leroy said, "Yeah. Hey, Norb, you hear about the fellow who bought the 50-foot boat and named it after you, Ma?" And there was a very long pause on that porch, and Norb said, "No." So Leroy told him. And it wasn't much of a joke. Then Gary came up the other side of the lawn, slow, hip and all, and told a worse one about a horse in a bar, which Gary had been telling since Reagan and has never once landed. And they stood in that yard in the dark for something like 35 minutes, telling this man bad jokes. And somewhere in there, Norb started correcting the punchlines because he knew the horse won. Everybody knows the horse won. And he told Gary he was telling it wrong, which he was. And he set the rifle down against the porch rail to use both hands to explain how it goes. And Gary walked up the steps and picked it up. That was it. That was the whole operation. They took him out to the hospital in Warren, and he's still there, and they're evaluating him. And Father Roman has been out twice. A neighbor of his, a woman I won't name, told me afterward she'd thought about knocking on his door back in the spring just to say hello. And she didn't, because then it had gotten to where you didn't quite know what he'd say, and she had things going on. She wasn't confessing. She was just telling me. 32 years that man walked into other people's basements, and there wasn't one person left who'd walk into his. And that's the news from Detroit and Lakeview, where the coffee's strong, the neighbors are nosy, and nobody ever quits. "7 days. Here's the week on paper and the week as it happened. This is the taper. 6 days from the start line of the Summit 200, 322 kilometers and 40,000 feet of climbing through the Colorado high country, starting at 5 in the morning on Monday, the 27th. The plan for this week asks for almost nothing. 32 kilometers across 7 days. 1,700 feet of climbing, nothing above intensity 2. I finished with 31.22 kilometers and 2,753 feet of climbing. I did not work harder than I was told to. I went to Colorado. That's the whole explanation, and we'll get to it. But the numbers are not what this week was about. The week was about a left knee that has been the entire story of this training block since the 7th of July. Sunday, the 19th. The plan said rest. I rested. Nothing recorded, 0 kilometers. Monday, the 20th, travel day. The plan's own note is emphatic about it. Arrive at altitude Monday, 7 days before the race, and start hyperhydrating the moment you land. So that's what I did. Detroit to Phoenix on Saturday, Phoenix to Frisco, Colorado on Monday. The plan also asked for an easy 2-kilometer walk in the evening to open up the lungs. Nothing recorded. I'm not going to claim a workout I can't show you. Sleeping at 9,000 feet, though, that started Monday night, and that's the part of the assignment that actually matters. Tuesday, the 21st. The plan said 8 kilometers, flat, 328 feet of climbing, an altitude shakeout, intensity 2, and a note that read, pace will feel slow, do not push, watch for headache and nausea. I went out at 3:19 in the afternoon with Anna Robbins, who is also racing the Summit 200, up to the Miners Creek trailhead, then onto the course itself, out about 4 kilometers and back, 7.74 kilometers. An hour 28 of moving time, 11:22 per kilometer, which is a hiking pace, and that was the point. 768 feet of elevation. The plan asked for 328. On a day it called flat. That's Summit County. You don't go looking for vertical here. It accumulates while you're having a conversation. In Michigan, I have to drive an hour and stack repeats to find 768 feet. Here, I found it by walking out and walking back. 75 degrees, bright blue sky, Miners Creek running down off the 10-mile range beside us the whole way, the kind of water that makes you think about drinking it. Which brings me to the actual lesson of the day. 8 kilometers in Michigan, I would not carry water for 8 kilometers. It would not occur to me. So I didn't carry any. Humidity was 32%. Before I hit the turnaround at 4 kilometers, I wanted water badly enough that I seriously considered going down to that creek and putting my face in it. I didn't. What actually fixed it was Anna handing me a piece of Trident on the way back, which got the saliva going and took the edge off entirely. A piece of gum solved it. That was not a hydration strategy. That is a warning. I've raced in the mountains before, and I still made a Michigan decision on my second day at altitude. Noted. Corrected. The knee, I ran a few short sections just to see. It felt close to 100%. Wednesday, the 22nd. The plan said 10 kilometers rolling 656 feet. Aerobic only. The note said it should feel slightly less awful than Tuesday. I picked up Anna and drove to a trailhead near the course with some real climbing on it, and found the parking area closed and torn up for construction. So we went to the Peninsula Recreation Area instead, out on the spit that juts into Dillon Reservoir, where the course runs straight through. 10.79 kilometers, 2 hours of moving time, 1108 per kilometer, 748 feet of elevation. And I want to be honest about what that felt like, which was comfortable, rolling, pleasant. Nothing I'd have written home about. Then I looked at the watch afterward, and there was 748 feet in it. In Michigan, that's a project. 68 degrees, overcast. A shower had come through around noon, and there were light sprinkles at the end. A reminder that these mountains manufacture their own afternoon weather, spotty and local, and you should plan around it rather than be surprised by it. Dillon is low, noticeably low, whole shelves of ground that ought to be under water, dry and cracked, and covered in gravel. That reservoir is fed by the Blue River, and it goes through the mountains in pipes to Denver, which means what I was looking at is what a couple million people are going to be drinking. A squirrel screamed at me from an evergreen for about 30 seconds, genuinely furious. I was on the trail. He had no case. The knee, no pain running, but when I press on the inside of it, there is still something there. Not 100%. Close. And on altitude, no headache, no breathing trouble, nothing abnormal at all. In past years, acclimatization has cost me a day or two of misery. Not this time. Thursday, the 23rd. The plan said 8 kilometers plus 4 20-second strides, 492 feet. Nico Steinbrunner flew in from Ohio to acclimate before the race, and we went out at 1:20, back up to Miners Creek and onto the course, out past 4 kilometers and turned around. 8.52 kilometers, 971 feet of climbing, the most of the week, and then the number that actually matters, 9:33 per kilometer. That's almost 2 minutes a kilometer faster than Tuesday. It is not because I got fit in 48 hours. It's because we hiked the entire way out, and then, at the turnaround, we ran nearly the whole way back. 4 kilometers of descent, rocks and roots, technical enough that you have to pick every foot placement. I did not skip the strides because I was tired. I skipped them because what was in front of me was a better test, and the knee never asked me to stop. Not once, not a twinge, not a warning, not the little negotiation I've been having with it every single day for 2.5 weeks. 4 kilometers of technical downhill, and it simply did the job. It rained on the way out, steady, and I got the jacket over the top of the pack, hood over the hat, kept everything in the pack dry and kept me dry, which is not something you can say about every rain shell. Some of them are rain resistant for about 5 minutes, and then they're a wet shirt. This one held. That's the gear test done. That's the knee test done. Both on the same afternoon, both unplanned. Friday, the 24th. The plan said rest, gear check, packet pickup, drop bags organized, sleep 9 hours. I rested. Nothing recorded, 0 kilometers. Saturday, the 25th. The plan said 4 kilometers, 164 feet, very short. Test the race shoes on race terrain if you can get to it. 9:28 in the morning, earliest I've been out all week, and deliberately because Monday starts at 5. 4.17 kilometers, 266 feet, 11:51 per kilometer. 63 degrees and clear out on the peninsula. That is a nothing workout. It is supposed to be a nothing workout. Its entire purpose is to remind the legs what moving feels like and then stop before they remember anything else. The ledger, 7 days. On foot, the plan asked for 32 kilometers. I covered 31.22. 4 days of movement, 3 days of rest, exactly as drawn up. The plan asked for 1,700 feet of vertical. I climbed 2,753, 61% over on a taper without once trying. That's not overtraining. That's a Michigan runner discovering that in Summit County the ground does the work for you whether you asked it to or not. And it's worth knowing before Monday because the race profile has 40,000 feet in it, and I have just been reminded that out here, climbing arrives without announcing itself. The body, no altitude symptoms, no headaches, no breathing problems, sleeping at 9,000 feet since Monday. And the knee, compare where this block has been. 2 weeks ago, I was walking a rail trail in Rochester at 10:42 per kilometer, taking 3 running steps at a time to test a joint and stopping when it answered. I canceled the 35-kilometer capstone 3 days early and never went back on it. I said out loud that it was more important to arrive healthy than to arrive trained. On Thursday, I ran 4 kilometers of technical descent, and the knee did not say one word. Where does that leave me? It leaves me standing on a start line Monday morning with less fitness than I planned for and a joint that finally stopped arguing. Last year, I came to this same race carrying a calf injury from the 1st of July. It ended me at 45 kilometers. I'm not doing that twice. The knee held. That's enough. In 2019, a man in San Diego who had been running for about a year and a half entered his first ultramarathon, Noble Canyon, out in Pine Valley. 50 kilometers. He finished 11th out of 217, which is a very good day for anybody, and an extraordinary one for a man who had run his first marathon that same year. He'd started because he wanted to get in shape, a few 5Ks, then the Rock and Roll Marathon. Then he joined a trail running group out of the local YMCA and went up into the mountains, and by his own account, that was the end of the argument. 20 months after that first ultramarathon, he stood on the start line of a 253-mile race across Arizona. He had never run anything longer than 100 kilometers. His name is Jose Sosa. He's 45 years old, and he has finished every Cocodona 250 ever run. Let me tell you what he does for a living, because it explains more than his race results do. He's a union iron worker. He builds the steel skeletons of buildings, the frame that goes up first and then disappears behind the glass, the part nobody looks at once the building is finished. He's a San Diego native who spent half his life in New York City, and in that half, he worked on the rebuilding of Ground Zero. He has said what that meant to him plainly enough, that putting the steel back up was emotional because of the lives that were lost there, and that he was proud to have been some part of bringing the city a little healing. Hold that thought for the rest of this chapter. A man whose job is to build the structure that holds everything else up and then step back so nobody can see it. May 2021, the first Cocodona, 253 miles from the Sonoran Desert up through the Bradshaws, over Mingus, down into Sedona, up Mount Eldon, and into Flagstaff. Nobody knew whether the race would survive the year. Somewhere out there, Sosa put a foot into a cattle guard, blew up the ankle, tore a muscle in his shin. He had, by his own count, more than 50 miles left. He climbed Mount Eldon on it, and he finished. 107 hours, 50 minutes, 41 seconds. 46th of the 108 people who made it. Later that year, somebody asked him which of his race performances he was proudest of. He had a good year to choose from. He had won a backyard ultra outright. He'd taken second overall in a 24-hour race. He'd finished 6th overall at the Mogollon Monster 100-miler and 5th overall at Badwater Salton Sea. He picked Cocodona. And the reason he gave was not the distance or the placing. It was that he'd had to endure an injured ankle for 50-plus miles in order to finish. That's the whole man right there in year one. The thing he was proudest of was the part that hurt and didn't stop him. Now, let's put the 6 years on the table, because the shape of them is the story. 2021, 107 hours, 50 minutes. 2022, 92 hours, 14. 2023, 105 hours, 9. 2024, 83 hours, 1 minute. 23rd overall out of 201, his fastest. 2025, 90 hours, 36. 2026, 97 hours, 6 minutes. 76th of 266. Look at that list and notice what it is not. It is not a curve. Jeff Garmire's 6 years are a curve. He arrived, he learned, he got fast. He stayed fast. Sosa's 6 years go up, down, down. His best year is his fourth. His worst is his first. In between, he has a year that was 13 hours slower than the year before it. He has never finished in the top 10. He has never been paid to run. He has never once been the story. And here is the thing that ought to stop you. The cutoff at Cocodona is 125 hours. His slowest finish, 2021. The year of the cattle guard was 107.50. That's 17 hours of margin. His second slowest, 2023, was 105.09, under 20 hours. Compare that to Garmeyer, who has never once been within 30 hours of the cutoff. Jose Sosa is the only one of the four who has ever had to look at the clock. Twice now, this streak has come down to a margin that a bad night could eat. A rolled ankle in the Bradshaws, a stomach that quits in Sedona, one long sit in one wrong chair, and it's gone. He is the most exposed man in the club, and he's still here. Now, the thing I actually want to tell you about Jose Sosa, he directs a race. It's called Rooster's Backyard Ultra. It runs at Roar Park in Chula Vista, just south of San Diego, a smooth, hard-packed 4-mile loop with one gentle hill. It's dog-friendly. You can sleep in your car in the parking lot. Pop-up tents only on the baseball fields, please. He's had 3 editions of it now and put another on the calendar for November. And if you don't know the format, you need to, because it is the strangest thing in the sport. A backyard ultra is one loop of 4.167 miles every hour, on the hour. You have exactly 1 hour to finish it. Then the bell rings and you go again. There is no distance, there is no finish line, there is no time to beat. It ends when everybody quits except one person. And that one person has to go out and run one more loop alone to be credited with anything at all. Every single competitor in a backyard ultra is recorded as a DNF except one. The format was invented by Lazarus Lake, the same man who invented the Barkley Marathons. The description on Sosa's own race page carries a line from Laz about how at some point it isn't your legs keeping you moving anymore, it's your will. So here is a man who belongs to a club of 4 whose entire remaining question is, who stops first? And in his spare time, he stages an event in a city park whose entire mechanism is that everyone stops, one at a time, until only one is left. And then it's over. He goes to Arizona in May and hopes nobody quits. He goes to Roar Park in the fall and organizes the quitting. I don't think he'd put it that way. I think he'd say it's a fun race and the loop is nice and the dogs are welcome. But I've been sitting with it for a week and I can't shake it. So the question this series is built on: when does the streak end? And who ends it? When Kevin Goldberg sat all 4 of them down and asked how it finally finishes, Jose Sosa's answer was one word: injury. And of the 4 answers, his is the most reasonable. Garmeyer said death and meant it, and he's never been near the cutoff. Sosa said an injury, and he has already run the experiment. He knows precisely what it costs to drag a wrecked ankle over Mount Eldon for 50 miles, because he did it in year 1, when the streak was worth nothing and there was no reason on earth to do it except that he had said he would. If anybody in this group has earned the right to name injury as the thing that stops him, it's the man who has already refused to let one. But I want to show you something he didn't say. Look at his racing calendar. 2022, 6 races, 574 miles. 2023, 6 races, 579 miles. 2024, 5 races, 582 miles. 3 straight years almost identical. A working man with a full racing season. 2025, 3 races, 312 miles. 2026, 2 races, 281 miles. In 2 years, his racing has been cut in half, and then nearly in half again. In 2026, he ran exactly 1 ultramarathon that was not Cocodona. Now, before you conclude he's fading, look at that one other race, Oriflamme, 50 kilometers, April of this year, 5 hours, 29 minutes. The last time he ran that same course in 2023, it took him 6:46. He took an hour and 16 minutes off at 45. So this is not a man slowing down. This is a man who has quietly cleared his calendar of everything except 1 race in May and 1 race he puts on himself in the fall. And that cuts 2 ways, and I honestly don't know which. Read it one way, and he's the safest of the 4. Garmeyer has a permanent argument with himself about where to be next May. Barkley, an FKT, a trail record, a fiancée with her own race calendar. Sosa has no competing ambitions left. Cocodona is his season. Nothing on his schedule can take that week away from him. Read it the other way, and a man who used to race 6 times a year and now races twice is a man whose appetite is changing. And we already know from Chapter 1 how these streaks actually end. Brian Janicek was still setting personal bests when he chose a different race. Wes Plate was healthy enough to spend the week on his feet at an aid station and chose to spend it crewing somebody else. Nothing happened to either of them. They just found something they'd rather do that week. And Jose Sosa is the one of the 4 who already knows how to be on the other side of the timing table. He's already an organizer. He's already the guy in the folding chair at 3 a.m. with a clipboard watching other people decide whether to go out again. He doesn't have to learn how to stop running and still belong to this sport. He's been practicing it in Chula Vista for 3 years. One last number, and then I'll leave him alone. Add his 6 Cocodona finishing times together: 107.50, 92.14, 105.09, 83.01, 90.036, 97.06. 575 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. 24 days is 576 hours. He is 1 second short of having spent exactly 24 days of his life moving across Arizona. 24 days, not of training, not of travel, of racing, of being on that course in the dark, in the heat, on an ankle that shouldn't have held, over one mountain after another for 6 consecutive Mays. Nobody added that up. It isn't on any results page. You have to go to 6 different pages and do the arithmetic yourself. And nobody ever has, because Jose Sosa has never finished in the top 10, and there's never been a reason to look. An iron worker, building the frame nobody sees. Next time, a fire captain out of Redlands, California, a man who once drank himself all the way to the bottom, and who will tell you flatly that running saved his life. He runs 100 miles a week. He has run 100 miles a week for more than 300 consecutive weeks. And that streak and this one are exactly the same age. Chapter 4, Andy Glaze. So here's the thread I found, and I didn't go looking for it. Every story this week is about the distance between people and who's willing to cross it. We finished a bridge, $4.5 billion, 1.5 miles of steel and cable, 97 years since the last one. And when the moment came to cut the ribbon on it, the two countries at either end could not stand in the same tent for 45 minutes. Meanwhile, the smoke came across that same border without asking anybody. It didn't need a bridge. It came right over Delray, where a couple hundred families sat with the windows shut, and then it went, and nobody at that ceremony said their names. And out on Fenmore Street, an 81-year-old man who spent 32 years walking into other people's basements sat alone in a house with nobody in it and got frightened enough to shoot at his own hedge. What fixed that was not a tactical response. It was Leroy standing halfway up a dark driveway saying, "Norb, it's Leroy," and then telling him a bad joke and another one for 35 minutes. Gary told the horse one wrong on purpose. I'd bet the house on it. And I'll tell you where I ran into it myself. Tuesday afternoon, 4 kilometers up a trail in Colorado, 32% humidity. No water on me because I'd packed like a man from Michigan. I was seriously considering putting my face in Miners Creek. What actually solved it was Anna Robbins reaching over and handing me a piece of gum. Nobody gets across on their own. Not the smoke, not the trucks, not a man on a porch, not a 69-year-old on a dry trail 6 days out from a race. Something has to come over from the other side. So, 2 questions. First, when's the last time you spent a real hour with somebody who isn't like you and didn't choose to? Not an argument online, in a room or a truck where neither of you could leave. I want to hear about it because I think a lot of us are going to have to count back further than we're comfortable with. And second, for the ultra people, Jose Sosa says the streak ends with an injury, and he's the only one of the 4 who's already proven he can outlast one. But he's gone from 6 races a year to 2. Which would you bet on? The injury he's watching for, or the calendar he's quietly clearing? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and the good ones end up shaping what we talk about next. And if this one was worth your time, give it a like and subscribe so Chapter 4 finds you. That's Andy Glaze, the fire captain, and the streak that was born the same week as this one. I'm Paul James Johnson. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work. I'll see you out there.